You've probably heard people talk about property cycles and things like house prices double every 7 or 12 years. There are so many factors that affect house prices. One strong theory is the 18-year property cycle. If you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing journey. The 18-year property cycle, what is that, I hear you ask? Well, this is from the works of Fred Harrison, this chap over here, who's an economist, and in his infamous book Boom Bust in 2005, he predicted the 2007 property crash. Fred Harrison in his research studied the last 200 years of the property market, and he concluded the issue was not actually house prices but the land that those particular buildings sit on. And as the economy grows, it expands, and the population grows as well, what that does, that puts pressure on housing in terms of the need for more and more office space and business space, and this then ultimately makes house prices go up. So effectively, it's the amount of land that's available is what pushes up these prices. And because we're in an environment where new development is strictly controlled, when you look at the map of the UK, there's only tiny amounts of that that's actually built on. The vast majority of the land is green spaces, but we can't build anywhere whatever we want. So the land that is restricted means that there's a limited supply, plus there's a high demand for property. When you put those two things together, that's what then pushes up prices. In effect, this then encourages speculation, and bank lending increases as well, which then creates an upward spiral in terms of house prices. The book is an absolute fascinating read. It's about 300 pages almost long, so I'd encourage you, if you want to learn more about this, definitely have a read of the book. Fred concludes that the only control for these is when we get a slump in the market and repossessions start to increase and unemployment starts to rise as well. And then we get this vicious cycle of boom and bust. Here's an example of what the 18-year property cycle graph looks like. This is one I borrowed from Landlord Vision in order to explain this to you. Make sure you go and check out their YouTube channel as well. Give them a little bit of love. They have property management software that they specialize in. So when we look at this graph, the first stage of the graph is the crash. And when we think about the economy that we're in right now, we go back to the last crash that we had, which is really towards the end of 2007 when it started, and it went on till about 2009. And this was the early stages of my property investing journey when I was trying to get involved in property. I was learning about property, trying to do lots of different strategies. And at that time, when the market crashed, people that have been involved in property will certainly remember that. Even if you weren't involved in property, you may remember what happened at that time. We were essentially in recession, repossessions were up, unemployment was high, and overall the economy was in quite a low. When we look at the first phase of the graph, this is the stage of the crash, and this runs for a few years. When we look at the economy that we're in right now, we roll the clock back to say 2007, late 2007, when we started entering into a property crash. At that time, we saw the property market probably run till about 2009, where prices were really slowing down and falling in some cases quite quickly. And this was a time when I was fairly early in my property investing journey, and I saw a lot of chaos around me. There was a huge amount of fear where people were scared to be investing in property. Although I was just getting into it, there were a number of people that are doing this for a long time that are really leaving the market and running in their droves because there was panic because prices were falling so quickly. And I remember property deals that were probably about 25% below market value at that time is what what we were picking up. And when we say below market value, it's really difficult. What is market value? Because the prices were falling so quickly. So properties typically that were selling for about 150,000 in 2006, those properties were quite easily picking up for around 100,000, 110,000, and being able to sell those on to other people, effectively sourcing those property deals on. But in a market like that, there are very few buyers and there are lots more sellers. So it flips around to maybe what we're seeing today in the current market. And what that does, that drives the prices right down. Also, as a result of that, what you see is banks will restrict lending. And sometimes there might still be an appetite to be able to go out and buy, and there's some people that are more adventurous. But of course, if the funding isn't available, that means you can't buy, and this then creates that downward spiral where the market's just falling. And that's really what we saw between about 2007 and 2009. And this was a great time for me to be learning about property when I look back now, because I remember going into lots of estate agents, talking to them about property market, because I was looking at different areas at the time. I was still trying to find out which may be the best place for me to get involved in. and spending time in Stoke-on-Trent and in Birmingham and a few other places in Dudley as well. And I'd go in and I'd see some estate agents and I'd be there literally for hours. I'd sit in their office chatting to them. You know, we'd get through lots of cups of teas and definitely get through a packet of biscuits talking about property and the property market. And the reality was no phones were ringing, nobody was walking through the door, so they're quite happy spending time with me in that way. During the crash, I also remember selling deals to a number of cash-rich people who were very cautious in terms of what they would buy. And looking back now, I can see that they were the cautious buyers that would buy one property and then sit and wait. But they were waiting for the dead certs. What I mean by that, they were waiting for the absolute bargain properties to come along. They'd just sit on their cash patiently and wait. And as one of those deals come along, they put their cash in that and that's it, they were done. They were not looking to buy any more, and that was a great deal for them because they were the kind of people who knew that if they buy a good deal now, over time, the market will change, it'll evolve, and they'll do significantly better. And which I'm sure when I look back now, some of those properties that I'd sold for 60, 70 grand, they're probably worth about 220, 230,000 pounds today because the market has changed so much. The next phase, as the change happens, is the recovery phase. Now, I believe for us in Birmingham, the recovery phase was probably late 2009, early 2010. That's when we started seeing the market changing slightly. And the recovery phase on the graph runs for about 7 years. Now, remember, these aren't exact timestamps. These are just kind of broad indications of what's going on and on the kind of signals that we should be looking for. Now, this recovery phase, I remember at that time, what we started to see was that properties were now starting to sell again. They weren't taking so long in terms of sitting around on the market. During the crash time, I remember it was not unusual for a property to be sitting for 3 months for sale with very little or no interest in that particular property. But when you started seeing a few more sold signs coming up, that people were starting to look at property, and when the key drivers were lenders were starting to slowly come back to the market. And this wasn't an overnight change in the market, it was just a gradual thing we started to see from about 2010 onwards. And what that meant was that the buy-to-let mortgages and bridging lenders, they were coming back to the market with more and more products. Whereas during the crash, most people were buying property and sitting on it and holding it for the long term. During the recovery phase, you start seeing an opportunity to be able to flip property as well. And this is something I was then looking at doing at the time to get involved more of, and I started dabbling a little bit in that and started partnering with other people and also starting doing some assisted sales as well. If you want to learn more about assisted sales, we'll link up a video up here for you so you can watch that afterwards. Really, it meant partnering with the owners of the property to add some value and sell it on for a profit. So it maybe it was a £100,000 house, you might be doing it like £20,000 to medium refurb and selling it on for £15,000, £20,000 profit. So hey, nothing to be writing home about, but these were the kind of transactions that was quite easy to do because they were relatively easy to find and pick up, add a little bit of value and sell on as well, because there was starting to be a little bit more demand for those properties. It was still taking a little bit of time to sell them. They weren't literally selling overnight, but they were starting to move. And you start seeing more of this in the recovery phase where there's more confidence, more people start coming to the market in terms of selling property who were a little bit unsure before in terms of whether they should sell now or whether they should wait. One of the things I started seeing during the correction phase was the interest in HMOs, and this is where I got interested in HMO property as well. And the primary reason being that this was the one strategy that was going to continue to give you a high cash flow per property, i.e. a high yield versus anything else that was going on at that time, because most of the other buy-to-let properties, the mortgage levels were quite high, the interest rates were still quite high at the time, and people were trying to find ways on how to create more income, and there was this kind of gradual shift towards HMOs. And I said this is where my journey in HMO started as well. As the market starts to build momentum, we then get to the point where we see a correction. And this is the next phase on the graph where we start seeing property prices then slowing down and even dropping as well. And this is really around 2017 to 2019 that we saw this going on. And what that meant was because there was a lot of uncertainty and sometimes there's certain things that trigger it. And I remember at that time, there's a lot of talk around Brexit that was slowing the property market down because people were indecisive or they were unsure whether now would be the right time to commit to a purchase or even put a property up to sell. And property prices really started to slow down. We noticed a little bit of difference in Birmingham, but I remember speaking to friends in London who really felt the pinch when houses prices started to retract, and they took much longer in terms of selling those properties. This correction phase runs for a shorter period of time, but effectively it's when the recovery is happening very quickly and people starting to lose confidence that things are moving too quickly, then we start seeing this correction phase. Before we talk about the boom phase of the property market, if you're enjoying this content, then it would really help me out if you just massage that like button just to let me know that you find this content useful, and also helps YouTube understand that you like this type of content, so it shows to more people just like you. This last phase of the graph, the boom phase, this is where I think we probably are right now, in the early stages of that boom. And this is primarily driven by lending becoming much, much easier. If you look right now, there's 95% mortgages for first-time buyers are out there, 75, 85% sort of range for buy-to-let investment you can get as well. But then what that shows is there's confidence from the lenders to be able to lend money for these type of projects. If you're doing developments or you're bridging, there's plenty of money around to do that. But when we look at, for example, before the last crash, i.e. the last big boom that we had, sort of 2006, and at that time, mortgages were available at 120%. So all the money you needed plus some, because the market was absolutely crazy, it was heated. Now, I'm not saying we're at that stage right now, but I feel we're in the early stages of that boom. And because the amount of money available, and also the way the prices are rising quite quickly, and what you'll see is a lot of confidence. So that means people are not afraid to pay the higher asking prices, or in some case even overpay on those prices. So if you try to purchase a property recently, if you've been out to have a look at properties, first of all, you probably end up with some block viewings or back-to-back viewings where there's a number of other people. Let's see if you can even get in to get a viewing. And let's say you get a viewing, you're interested in the property, you make an offer, then you find there's already 5 other offers there, and it might go to best and finals. So you're in now a bidding war to try and get that property. When you finally realize what it's actually sold for, it's probably significantly more than what the initial asking price was. And these are all the signs that you start seeing in a boom market, where the prices are moving very quickly, people are overpaying, transactions are happening very, very quickly, and the banks are supporting it by providing the lending. During these times, what we also see is a lot more spending. People are spending a lot more money than they are ordinarily, especially on higher value transactions like cars and also holidays. Although we've been in lockdown, there hasn't been much of that happening. There's certainly the confidence that there is a lot of cash out there, and people are going to be starting to spend in this way. And we've also already started seeing not only house prices going up, but values of certain cars are shooting up as well, that people are spending money on luxury cars. This time also means that we see very low numbers of repossessions happening, bankruptcies, business going into administration. These numbers tend to be very low during a boom time. Because lending becomes easier, as the banks have more confidence, you start seeing more and more development start happening, and especially new builds in the city centres. A great example of being able to kind of assess the level of interest in the market is if you look at a city centre skyline, look at the number of cranes that are up compared to maybe last year or the year before. And if we look across Birmingham skyline, you'll see so many cranes are up, so many big developments that are happening, all indicators that we're in this boom state. So what happens after the boom? Well, unfortunately, the inevitable crash happens, and we go back through the cycle and it all starts again. So how can we tell where we are in the property cycle? So I've talked about where I think where we are in the cycle right now. And I really believe that we're in the early to mid stages of a boom at the moment, but really nobody knows for sure. All we do is use our experience, our knowledge, our understanding of the market. We look at the indicators and we make our interpretation of what's going on and where we think we are. And you speak to several different people that have several different views, and what I'm sharing with you is my knowledge and experience of what I think is happening. And I don't know for sure, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Make sure you pop in the comment section below in terms of where you think we are in this marketplace right now, in this 18-year cycle, or even if you believe the 18-year cycle exists. So if you look at this graph now, this one shows the last 3 18-year cycles in terms of where they are, and I think it's a good representation of what's going on, and hence why I think we're in the early to mid stages of a boom with everything that's going on. But things can change just like that in the property market, and it's really difficult to say. We could still be at the back end of a correction, for example, where things are just starting to or we're getting onto a correction because things have been heated. Remember, the early signs we will start seeing is that people start losing confidence in the market because the price is so high. Some people retract and they start buying, and there's so many things that are happening in the market that's been driving the market right now. And I've done a number of videos on the property market, and we'll link another one up over here for you, which is the one I did a few weeks ago about where we are in the property market and where I think we're going. Often people will say to me, hey, look, I'm just going to wait till we're at the bottom of the property market, so that way I'm going to get the best possible deal. Like those chaps I talked about earlier on, where they sit around on their cash, waiting for those best deals. But how do we know when we're going to find those best deals? How do we know when we find an amazing deal that the price is still not going to continue to fall? Well, the reality is we don't know at that moment in time. The only way we know is when we can look back after the event, after it's happened, and on the graphs it starts to show that the price is starting to increase again. that's the way we know we've hit the bottom of the market and now we're starting to head up again. At that moment in time, you can't tell exactly where we are. Just like right now, we can't say exactly where we are in the boom market. All we can see is the prices that are rising around us. Now, when all this chaos is going on around us, it's really important to keep a level head and be clear about what it is that you were doing, what your strategy is, and what type of model that you're following for your property investing, because that's what's going to help you and keep you focused when everyone else is losing their mind, overpaying for things as well. And then taking things into context. For example, you'll have extremes of the market. For instance, what's happening in central London, prime locations like Mayfair. You'll have crazy prices still happening in that location and demand, which is not representative of the rest of the market because it's a very unique place. And also on the other end, for example, we might look at Middlesbrough, where prices are very, very low. But again, that's not really a representative of what happens to the rest of the market. If the market's active there or slow there, you've got to look at the mainstream market, what's going on, look at those clues and look at those indicators, and make sure you watch my videos. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you get to see these videos. And as I said, I'm sharing with you my knowledge and experience of 15 years in this business. Property strategy is absolutely key, using the right strategy in the right marketplace at the right point in the property cycle. If you're trying to figure out what your strategy is, then make sure you watch this video over here next, where I go into this in a lot more detail in terms of finding the right strategy for you. And if you want to see what strategies I'm using in 2021, then make sure you click on this video over here, and I'll see you over there on the video.